What's up, Weekend Warriors, and welcome to the Week 14 edition of the podcast. I'm back, the Content King, the Commissioner, for another week, another weekly episode. And stop me if you heard this before, but standings are tight. We got a lot to get into today. You know, the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been saying it, and, we've been giving out everyone's record and points for and who's playing who. And in all seriousness, you would need, deep archive analysts to get into things and really figure out, well, this person, plays this person and actually map out Team A versus Team B versus Team C. But with 2 weeks left, there's still, admittedly, a ton of variables left with the amount of people that are playing in the cluster together. But today I'll be able to maybe give a little bit more of an accurate representation of some, behind-the-scenes metrics / intricacies of the remaining schedules and who we think is going to make the dance and who we think, unfortunately, is going to be sitting on the sidelines. So, getting into that real quick, a lot to cover, but we're going to cover my recap of Week 13. Was a phenomenal week for the Commissioner. Green Bay -3 on Thursday Night Football against San Francisco. Probably the easiest pick San Francisco. Miami. Probably the easiest pick. Going to cold weather. Tua's 0 infinity. Thursday Night King delivers. 9-4 on Thursday night. Shout out Brett. And then we had New England +3. Credit to the Colts for going for a 2-point conversion. New England loses by 1. The commish covers. 2-0. 2-0 on the week to take me to 14-12 on the year. Very successful, profitable weekend. Very successful, profitable over the course of the season. And make sure you up your unit on Thursday night because you know you'll be up big. All right, so fantasy picks, not as successful. And a couple people to blame, including myself. So let's get into it. I beat Otley. It looked like maybe I was off to a rocky start, and I got it done. I took care of business. So, sorry, I took care of you. And then the other one that I had correct was Valone over Dean, which was a pretty easy one. Then I had Chris over Jake, which we have to address it. Chris, little cocky's not the right word. Comfortable is the right word. He was feeling comfortable. And, nice lead. And somehow Njoku 2 touchdowns and Denver 2 touchdowns. And Jake slides by. Chris, little blunder, had a kicker play on Friday. He was out, made a pickup of Bass, never made the switch. Could cost him a spot in the playoffs. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. He's still not eliminated. And this week is a huge week. But he shot himself in the foot, and he helped out some other teams potentially that are in this cluster. So, can Chris rebound from that mistake? It is yet to be seen. And Jake playing spoiler, so I got that one wrong. I had Terry over Booty. Another game that came down to the wire. Kittle got Terry 1 point on Sunday Night Football. And then on Monday Night Football, Jerry Jeudy, he needed 12. He got about 50 from Jerry Jeudy. He had about 240 yards and a touchdown. So, Booty takes care of Terry. I got that one wrong. And then I had Brett over Kevin, which I switched on the pod, and that's why I'm saying I shot myself in the foot there. If I would have stuck to my guns and stuck with Kevin, and if Chris would have played his kicker, I would have been 4-1. But Kevin beats Brett, Chris loses to Jake, and I'm at 2-3. An odd, rare, losing week in the fantasy predictions. That brings me to 39-26 on the season. 2-3 for the week. Valone, high score of the week for the first time all season. Congratulations to Valone. He's racked up now $25 that he's taking home. All right. Quickly on the waiver wire. Very rare for this late in the season for a guy, McCaffrey to go down. Anybody that had Jordan Mason as their backup, handcuff on a team was probably really excited. And then he gets announced that he's on IR. Crazy. The Niners are in shambles. And, hey, I was fortunate to not spend a lot of fab money throughout the season. I said, you know what? I don't know how many more big pickups there's going to be like this year. Let me, spend a lot, bring him on my team so another one of my competitors doesn't necessarily add him to their team. So I went out and did it. I spent 44, quite a bit for Guerrero, and he should be the starter for the Niners. But who knows? That team, they're definitely trending in the wrong direction. A lot of injuries, and we'll see what happens. But one thing I do know is Kyle Shanahan can run the ball. I think I could get 15 carries for about 65 yards on that team. Hopefully Guerrero can do something there. Besides that, there really wasn't a lot of noise. Dean spent up for Will Levis so that he can maybe take down Jake in the Harding Bowl, the last place bowl. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, one other thing I want to mention, two real quick things, actually. Very important things. One is Spotify recaps on the year. Check them out. Mine's all Frozen soundtrack. And, I think I listen to Let It Go like weekly. Old McDonald's on there. Chris T sent me a text, made me smile. He said one of his top listened to artists on the season was the Content King himself, the Commish, ranked in his yearly standings or whatever for most watched content. So pat yourself on the back. Listen, that's awesome. Thank you, Chris. That's great. Appreciate you sharing that. Thanks for being a loyal compadre. In addition to that, the name change game has really gotten going. I got to shout it out. I mean, first we got, Valone, who obviously continues to change his name of who he's playing. And this week it's great, 10% chance of the playoffs, huh? A little dig at Brett. Brett fueled that Valone fire, and I don't know if that fire is going to be put out anytime soon. Terry changing it to leaking oil. And on this podcast, we talked about, hey, for the sake of all these crazy playoff, situations, let's just assume Terry's in because it's too complicated for even two spots. Let's just say that he's in. And I got to tell you, and he knows it. He changed his name to Leaking Oil, and he needs a win. He needs to win at least one of the next two, and we'll get into that here in a second. So, and then Otley staying with his theme, saying you're saying there's a chance. I was disappointed, Ott, that you kept your picture as Adam Sandler and did not change it to Jim Carrey from Dumb and Dumber, but, a topic for another time. So, standings update. I'm in. I've locked up the top spot. 1-12 in a row. Don't need to talk anymore about that. Terry, 8-5. Now, the interesting point about Terry at 8-5, it still says he has an 88% chance of making the playoffs. But what I want to bring up is super important. He has 1,529 points. Valone has 1,573, so 50 more. Kevin has 1,520, so 9 less. Okay? And then Booty, who is next, has about 70 less than Terry. Probably not going to catch him. And then Brett has 1,731. So I bring that up. It's close to Fetty Wap, 1,738. Not quite. Work on that, Brett. But 1,731. I bring it up because if Valone continues to win and leapfrogs Terry, if Kevin continues to win and leapfrogs Terry, and Brett continues to win and ties Terry, he will have the point tiebreaker. So Terry, the one good thing is Booty's not going to catch you in points, but could catch you in record, especially after he just beat Terry this past week. And then you have, Brett, who could have the same record as Terry and pass him, but he would have to win out, and Terry would have to lose out. So not likely, but could happen. So the next and most important thing about this, I think, is the matchups. And quickly, a key matchup, Terry's going to play Ott this week. We'll talk about that. And then he plays Kevin. That's huge. And that could really be a win and get in situation for either team, depending on what happens this week. Brett, we've talked about him all season. He has the potential colossal blockbuster matchup this week against Valone. Could decide the playoffs. Next week plays Dean. He needs to win at least one, preferably this one against Valone. Probably needs to win two, depending on what happens here down the stretch with these other teams. And then we have Booty, who, let me just see if I can find him here, the scientist. He plays Chris and Jake. Now, Chris, also fighting for a spot, huge matchup, and then Jake, bottom of the barrel. Booty, a nice path here to potentially make it in. And then Kevin runs the gauntlet. He has myself, and he has Terry. So, really, really difficult there for Kevin. If he wins 1 out of 2, depending on some of these other things, he could be in. All right? So let's talk about it. Let's go matchup by matchup. The first one, it is going to be the Toilet Bowl. My dad versus Jake. Jake, famously on this pod, has said that he's not going to come in last. My dad's going to come in last. A huge victory for him to squeak it out by Chris last week, or this matchup may decide the winner. Well, I should say decide the loser. But in this case, if Dean does beat Jake, Jake would still hold the points tiebreaker by a lot, like 160. So that would mean for Dean to leapfrog Jake, Jake would have to lose to, we just said it, Booty in the final week. And Dean would have to win this week and then beat Brett in the final week. I'm going to say if we're giving numbers out and percentages, probably about a 10% chance that Dean runs the table after he lost 8 in a row. 10% is probably a lot. I'm going to say 8%. So, Dean, looking at the basement, but you're not dead yet. Put a bid in on Garendo. Picked up Will Levis. I appreciate the fight. And this is a big matchup this week. So, what do I think about this matchup? Well, it's a little tough at this moment. This is Wednesday evening. Jake has some bye week issues he needs to fill. Currently no quarterback with Lamar on bye, Tank Dell on bye, and Denver's defense on bye. He's got to plug some holes. Dean goes out and gets Levis in a good matchup against Jacksonville. Kyron Connor as his 2 running backs. C.J. Stroud, Bo Nix on bye. That's why he got Levis. And then Drake London and Mooney. But obviously, the quarterback situation in Atlanta, Kirk Cousins has been B.A.D. banned. So I was trying to find the hole, and that's why I was stumbling a little bit, because I forgot Dean had McCaffrey. Of course he did. And remember all that stuff I said about ETN being the worst pick? I kind of stand by that, but now, with McCaffrey just going down, it's just an homage to Dean's season and kind of where he's at. But that being said, I'm going to come out, I'm going to regret this, but picking Jake hasn't really been a winning formula either, although last week I probably should have. With Lamar out, Pacheco still being acclimated, no Tank Dell, Jake's already running the 2 tight end system with Hawkinson and Njoku. The miracle last week from Denver. I think Dean gets one back. A little karma bites Jake in the butt and he makes him sweat the last week of the season. I think the last week of the season, it's just indicative of how this league is gone, that it's going to be a sweat for the playoff push for all these teams. I think it's going to be a sweat for last place. I think Dean pushes Jake this week, beats him, and then the last week becomes ever so more important. Give me Dean over Jake. Let me make sure that's what I have written down. It is in the first matchup. All right, so we'll do it aside because I like to mix these in sometimes. Thursday night pick. To me, this is an easy pick. The Packers have been playing excellent football. They've been running the ball really well. They've been playing good defense. The Lions, been playing great football. They're a machine at home. And last week on Thanksgiving, on Thursday night, they kind of took their foot off the pedal in the second half, and they barely beat the Bears, and the Bears shot themselves in the foot. This is the Packers can beat the Lions type game, and, they're in a spot to do it. I think that Green Bay has been playing some bad teams. I think that they're not going to be able to run the ball as well in Detroit, even though Detroit's a little banged up. I think Detroit's a machine at home. I think they don't take their foot off the pedal this week. I think they don't hand the ball to Penei Sewell and let him try to throw a pass. I think they don't have Jahmyr Gibbs fumble at the 3-yard line. I think Detroit comes out at home, divisional matchup, and I think they steamroll the Packers to a 10-plus point victory. And I think Detroit -3. I've seen it 3.5. I just double-checked it. It's -118, -3 on DraftKings. I would take -3 just so you don't get hooked. And the Lions are my pick. If I win this, I'll be 10-4 on Thursday night. Feel free to tip the Content King anything you'd like. The Thursday Night King, Content King, what have you. So that's my other pick, my one pick. I'll save my other pick. So let's jump into the next matchup. And there's a lot of important ones. We got the Jake and Dean one out of the way, which is important in its own right. But Otley and Terry, which could easily there's an argument that can be made that this is the matchup of the week, but I am not making the matchup of the week because we have some other Goliathal? No. We have some other colossal, we'll stick with colossal matchups in the league. So, Otley, to save his season one last time, he has a 1% chance. And just so you're following along at home, he would have to get to 7 wins, and Valone and Kevin and Booty would all have to lose out. The only thing that we just did, though, we just determined that they all do play different teams, right? Booty plays Jake the last week, right? Now you're going to make me look at this. Come on, Ty, pick it together. Booty plays Chris and Jake, right? Valone plays Brett, and then he plays me, so he could lose out, right? And then we said, let's just see here. Kevin plays Terry and Tyler. So if those 3 teams go 0-2, Otley goes 2-0. He would have the same record as those teams. Otley has 16-13 points, which is more than Valone, Kevin, and Booty. That is his path to the playoffs. He can pretty much, again, one of those teams, there's 3 teams there in 2 spots. So he has to leapfrog one of those teams and another one of those teams and possibly Brett. But Brett might come out in the wash himself. So, you're probably thinking, man, that was confusing. I confused myself. Win this week. Don't worry about your points. Win next week and need some help from some others. You could also win out and not make it. That is probably the most likely scenario. But this week, man, calling it like I see it, we just said Terry needs to win, and we said this is going to be an interesting finish, and it's going to come down to the wire. And Terry doesn't have Jonathan Taylor this week, and Downs is injured. Hurts and Brown versus Carolina, but is that going to be a Saquon game? If it is, Otley has Saquon, right? And then Waddle's been inconsistent. Keenan Allen's been great, but he's coming off of a couple really, really good weeks. Is he really going to keep that up? Mahomes playing better football with Kelsey. Sunday Night Football against the Chargers, that could be a little high scoring. And Amon-Ra St. Brown in that game that I just called, I like Detroit -3. I also kind of like the over. It's the highest over-under on the slate, 51.5. I really think Otley's going to win this matchup, and I think that's the way this league is going to be, and I think it's going to put the heat on Terry to win the following week. So give me Ott over Terry in Week 14. Next matchup I have, matchup of the week runner-up, Chris and Booty. Again, Chris shot himself in the foot, still has a chance. Booty really, really needs to win because he does not have the point tiebreaker over anybody. So he needs to win this game. And Booty's team has been hit or miss. Last week he had the stones to bench Marvin Harrison Jr. Judy worked out for him, right? He's got guys like Harrison, who's very volatile. He's got guys like Judy, very volatile, right? McLaurin on bye, not going to necessarily help him, and Breece Hall, just hasn't been that good. But Ken Walker in a division matchup against Arizona. Sam Darnold's playing good football. How does Chris win this matchup? Josh Allen keeps doing his thing. He gets probably good production from Tony Pollard at home against Jacksonville. Tyreek, the Jets have given up. I think Tyreek could have a week this week. He did have a touchdown last week. And Jaden Reed in that same game I've been talking about. Jaden Reed and David Montgomery. Chris has both those guys in this match. Currently, as of this writing, IR kicker in there. Maybe he'll make some adjustments there. But even with that, and Baltimore's D on bye, and then Booty has Washington's D on bye, they're projected to tie. I'm going Booty because I really just think he's gritty right now. And he's talked about how his team has underperformed and hasn't lived up to expectations, and it's been a grind for him. But he's rattling off wins. He could be that team that doesn't necessarily have the most points or is the best, but just kind of sneaks in with strength of schedule and just discipline. And he told me, he said, we golfed last weekend or whatever it was, and he was like, with my record with my points and my team's performance, I could easily have 2 or 3 wins. And, it broke right for him in the beginning, but he's hanging with it, and I just think he's going to edge Chris this week. I'm taking Booty over Chris. All right, matchup of the week. We've talked about it. We foreshadowed it weeks ago. We got Valone and Brett. Valone, obviously, we said took the percentage thing to heart. I think it's more of a shtick, but it's still funny. Brett texted me last week, I'm going to have the most points in the league and miss the playoffs. Brett, way to have a positive attitude. We really appreciate that. Now, what I can say, if I was in Brett's shoes, I probably wouldn't have a positive attitude either. However, you're here, man. You're here. There's 2 weeks left, right? If you signed up for this and somebody said you'd have a very good chance of making the playoffs, and you don't, I want to be clear, you do not control your own destiny, right? Because if you beat Valone, that's great. But if Booty and Kevin both win and go 2-0 and Terry stays ahead, you could still miss. But most likely, if you win out, you will most likely, I think, probably make it. So the site gives you 29%. That's probably about right. But if you win this week and beat Valone, whoo, that's going to be big. So, man, was going to pick against Brett last week. I really thought he was going to win. Came up short. I got to tell you, no Derrick Henry stings. You got Chuba Hubbard against the Philly defense with Brooks kind of getting acclimated. Irving's been a godsend, and him at home against Vegas could be the deciding factor in this. Another guy who's going to be huge for Brett is Debo. He's been so bad, they have no choice but to give him the ball now with all these injuries. But I got to tell you, if I'm looking at the teams across the league and who I'm most afraid of to play in the playoffs, Chris Vallone's team right now is just firing. He's got Bijan, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown. Chase Brown has been phenomenal for the Bengals. He doesn't have the name value as the other guys, but those three running backs, I put him up against anybody's three running backs in this league right now. So that combined with McConkey playing good football, Adams, a threat for a touchdown, Evans is a great player. Vallone's team's so good right now, he has DK Metcalf on his bench. So really the wild card for Vallone is quarterback. He's got Jared Goff this week in that shootout I'm talking about. This is an easy one for me. I'm taking Vallone. I think that his luck has been on his side. This is a revenge game for him for all these reasons. He would pretty much, I don't want to say lock up a spot, but this would pretty much catapult him into the playoffs because it would send Brent down. He has more points than the other teams behind him. This would not make him in for sure because, again, Kevin and Booty could win out. But this would really, really help his chances, and I think he gets it done over Brett. How can Brett win? It's easy. Burrow and Chase on Monday Night Football in Dallas against maybe one of the worst defense. Been playing better, but that could be a shootout, and that's how Brett can win, and they can score 90 points. So if you're up 80, don't feel safe. That's a little scary. Taking Chris Vallone. All right, and then I'll do mine a little bit more quickly, more so because it is a tight matchup. Kevin, if I had to pick a third team, I think it's a tie between him and Brett that are very scary. Brett for the aforementioned Chase and Burrow reasons, plus he's getting Henry back off a bye. So don't get me wrong, Brett has a very, very good team as well. And Kevin, Achan's been great. Bowers is a wide receiver one. You can play at tight end, which is phenomenal, right? And then he's been getting points. He won last week with nothing from Cooper Kupp. He's been getting points from Tua. And Tua throws the ball to Achan a lot. So they connect for a lot of points. But listen, I have some bye week issues with Jaden, most namely on bye. Brian Robinson, Nico Collins on bye, okay? But another person, I said Vallone's team's so good. He's got Metcalf on his bench. My team is very solid. I have Garrett Wilson on the bench. I might regret buying this jersey, by the way. He's disappointing me. I think it's more Rodgers. But, again, I have a solid team, some bye week issues this week. I just have been winning. I think I will continue to win. And for Brett, for Vallone, for Booty, for Chris, hey, I'm going to try and beat Kev for you. Terry, too, I guess. So they're all rooting for me. Kev, I think I beat you, but I would not be surprised. You have a good team. We'll see what happens. All right, my other pick, call it a homer pick, Minnesota -5.5. Kirk Cousins coming back to Minnesota. That's been one that's been circled all season, but Atlanta is broken right now. They're not going to be able to run the ball against the Vikings. They have a super strong run defense, and Kirk looks lost right now. I think Kevin O'Connell, and Brian Flores together will draw up a game plan against Kirk. It's a 5.5-point line, which you would think it's probably supposed to be tighter than that. I think for that reason, Minnesota wins by a touchdown. Take it or leave it, Minnesota -5.5. Guys, next week is the last week of the regular season. I wish you all good luck, and I'll see you next week. Commish out.